Thank you, Liz. It's so nice to see everyone. It's so nice to be here and to be part of the Story Salon and to be part of the festival. And I thank all of you very much for coming. So I'm going to start. How Maxine Hung Kingston helped me become a writer. I remember clearly when I became a writer, though I didn't know it then. At the end of freshman year at Middlebury College, we were getting our final papers and projects back before summer break. I was especially anxious to see what grade I got for my book report on Maxine Hung Kingston's The Woman Warrior. The book was assigned. I dutifully read it and enjoyed every word. I was 18. My mind was wide open, and I was riveted by the story about the child of Chinese immigrants in California in the 1950s. I was fascinated by the nuances of Chinese culture, but mainly I was obsessed with the seemingly powerless woman becoming a warrior. It was the richest, luscious writing I had ever read. I was spellbound by the words and what Kingston revealed in chapter 1. When Kingston introduced the no-name woman, a character based on talk stories her mother told her about her aunt, she does not downplay the horror of this young woman's life. Around 1910, a woman in a grain-starved Chinese village was raped while her husband was away in America working and sending money home. She became pregnant, accused of adultery and outcast. She gives birth in a pigsty. No-name woman was never invited back into the community, and her child was reviled. After a night suckling her newborn, she killed herself and her child in the family's well. Before no-name woman's death, the villagers came to her home seeking retribution for her social sin and its threat to the impoverished village. Kingston's precise pacing and details stretched out the time. On the night the baby was to be born, the villagers raided the family's home. Some wore white masks. Others obscured their faces and their long hair. They threw mud, rocks, and eggs at the home, then slaughtered the animals. The night filled with the screams of death, roosters, pigs, and a final great roar from an ox. Villagers broke down the front and back doors of the house, entering with knives dripping with animal blood. They ransacked No-Name's room, ripped her clothes and shoes, and broke her combs. They smeared blood on the doors and the walls. In the kitchen, they broke bowls, banged pots, overturned jugs of duck eggs, and pickled fruit. They showed no mercy for No-Name woman, not even in the afterlife, where she became a ghost, begging for scraps. When I got my paper back, I was thrilled to get an A+. And praise from my professor, including these 5 words: "You are an excellent writer." No one had ever called me a writer. After class in the cafeteria, I took my paper out and read it again, making sure not one drop of pizza grease got on it. Then I rushed back to my room to finish packing. My parents were on their way, but I couldn't find my Woman Warrior report. I ran to the cafeteria as fast as I could and had to bang on the back door until someone heard me. Inside, the custodian was cleaning up. I ran up to him, trying not to sound hysterical. "Hi, did you see a handwritten report in a clear report folder with a red slide grip holder?" He stared at me for a beat. I was sweating, mouth dry, throat scratchy, my eyes moist with held-back tears. "I haven't gotten to the back tables yet," he said, pointing. "Everything else has been cleaned." A Creature of habit, I always ate lunch at the same table up front where the natural light was brightest. I looked at the garbage can, 100% certain my woman warrior report was there. I told the custodian that I needed to look for my report, and he gently dissuaded me. Trust me, it's not worth it, he said. I persisted. He opened the bag. I learned something. Industrial high-density polymer contractor bags hold all sorts of garbage. Liquid, solids, and every disgusting thing in between. The bag opened wide and floppy. I looked inside at the wet, dirty, greasy, stinking slop. Rivulets of milk clung to disintegrating paper trays. Congealed cheese hung in clumps from soiled paper towels. There was a single shoe with worn rubber treads and shredded laces. I thought I saw wriggling maggots. I imagined my report suffocated in grease, my beautiful words and perfect paragraphs disappearing forever. Could I recreate my paper? Could I figure out what I had done the first time? Was it all no-dos and coffee? Was it me waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning to edit the last paragraph just one more time before bringing it to class? That report made me feel capable, powerful, and finally seen. I thought of the professor. She was newly tenured, teaching a large survey lit class. I spoke to her maybe once. She introduced us to the concept of writing tight and the need to think of readers when writing. I never got to say goodbye to her. Over the years, I have silently thanked her for the 5 words she wrote that would ultimately define my life. You are an excellent writer. I didn't know the magic formula, but I knew I had to write. That summer, I huddled in my bedroom, consuming books about writing, learning about structure, sourcing, transitions, and the usefulness of bullet points. I read the Washington Post and rewrote articles, reviews, and op-eds word for word to better understand the rhythm of writing. Eventually, I moved to New York City where I got work editing and proofreading. I joined Gotham Writers Workshop and eyed magazines on newsstands fantasizing about one day seeing my byline there for all to see. In our Gotham Writers Workshops, we sat in buildings with old elevators and awful temperature control, usually at night and on weekends. People often ran in late, after work, usually with coffee. With the constant drum of the city in the background, we wrote and workshopped, and we supported each other. Many of the first articles I published in magazines were developed in those workshops. Soon I got a medical writing job, which paid well, and eventually I went to grad school for STEM publishing. My professor's words were prophetic. I became a writer. I wrote what I felt: joy, excitement, fury, the blues, anger, grief, and ambition. I wrote love poems, accusatory manifestos, letters of forgiveness and reconciliation, a eulogy for the tragic death of my 23-year-old nephew. I wrote about my birth experience for Pregnancy Magazine. I wrote for the World Wide Web when you still had to know HTML. I wrote about 9/11 and trips to Coney Island and Hunter Mountain. I wrote letters about injustice and letters to the editor. I wrote about partying all night at Limelight and Palladium, followed by a sunrise coffee and car breakfast at Veselka. When people tried to put me in my place, I wrote myself into the place I wanted to be. I defined myself not just by what I said, but how I said it. I worked hard with integrity. I interviewed CEOs, entrepreneurs, celebrities, parents of sick children, patients, protesters, artists, and even a Midwestern farmer. I remember that one pivotal moment, and many other writers in here may also remember that, a juncture when all of the distinct things that writers write, from highly technical white papers with Gantt charts to poetry composed while taking psychoactive drugs in Peru, all became one thing: content. Content. And content became king, and apparently it still is. All these years later, why has this book stuck with me? Perhaps it's serendipity, Or maybe a series of synchronicities. Maybe it's because reading it as an 18-year-old young Black woman, I intuitively understood the feeling of being undervalued and stuck, of being misunderstood and underestimated. When she was young, Kingston was constantly reminded that despite getting straight A's, she was still a girl. Better to raise geese than girls, she heard. Girls are maggots in the rice. There is no profit in raising girls. Years later, the two daughters I have raised with my Chinese American husband are the center of our universe. I spirited my daughter's copy of Woman Warrior from her bright red bookcase. Red symbolizes good fortune in Chinese culture. Like Kingston, I dreamed big, was brought low, and rose again. One word at a time. I found my community of friends, activists, artists, and fellow writers. Kingston explains what drove her to write Woman Warrior like this. What I am doing as an artist and a writer and a human being is saying, I'm going to give her back her life. I'm going to bring her to life, and I'm going to make all of us face her. And we're going to find meaning for her life. We're going to rescue her. She has no name, but I'm going to give her her life and immortality. In fact, speaking truth to power through writing is one reason that the pen is indeed mightier than the sword. The ability to name something, call it out in the bright light of day, and then redefine it. That's power. After reading Woman Warrior, I recognized that same power in other female writers. Toni Morrison, Yagyasi, Anne Frank, Arundhati Roy, Bernadine Evaristo, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Zadie Smith, Virginia Woolf, Emily Dickinson, and countless others. I am not alone finding inspiration in Kingston. In 2014, when President Obama presented Kingston with the National Medal of Arts, he said Woman Warrior influenced his writing of Dreams of My Father. Woman Warrior was my introduction to the power of words and the need to use them wisely to write a better narrative for ourselves and for the world around us. Thank you.